So do we have people in already?
Oh yeah, and we'll have people filing in for the next couple of minutes.
Okay, should I just wait a little bit? Yeah.
Yes, I'd like to introduce you anyhow beforehand. So
you can see how many
yeah,
people.
I'm going to end my video, and you're welcome to stop your video.
Okay.
And you can see we have a nice clean screen there.
Good.
All right, this is all right, we're off to the races. Hello, everybody, and welcome. Thanks for joining us today. We're off to a 1 minute late start. My apologies. My name's Alan Barr with COEH Northern California. And on behalf of the NIOSH-supported education and research centers throughout the country, we're pleased to present the 2021 ERC Ergonomics webinar series, where we offer free monthly webinars on various topics on human factors and ergonomics. This collaborative effort on behalf of each ERC's continuing education program aspires to provide access to current research supported through NIOSH ERC programs. Thanks again for joining us today. If you're logged in with your registration email, you will receive a link to the recording of today's webinar and an evaluation form that will qualify you for a certificate of completion worth 1 continuing education contact hour. Some upcoming webinars you might be interested in. On May 5th, right around the corner, we have racial disparities in COVID-19 mortality among essential workers in the United States. That's presented by Dr. Tiana Rogers. And also on May 19th, you can join us for the next in our ERC Ergonomics series titled An Investigation of Home Ergonomics Issues Experienced by University Faculty and Staff Due to COVID-19. This one will be presented by Thomas Girding, MPH, with University of Cincinnati ERC. You can register for those webinars and other upcoming webinars at coeh.berkeley.edu/webinars. You will be muted for today's presentation. If you'd like to ask a question, please enter it into the online Q&A box rather than the chat. Just makes my life a little bit easier. And we'll save some time at the end of the presentation to address your questions. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be made available with past webinars on the COEH Northern California YouTube channel. And please do like and subscribe to our channel to help us grow. For today, as you can see on the splash, we have Washington State Janitors Workload Study. It's presented by Dr. Stephen Bao in partnership with Northwest Center for Occupational Health and Safety. Dr. Bao is a certified professional ergonomist, a senior epidemiologist and ergonomist at Washington State Department of Labor and Industries. He's also an affiliated professor at the Department of Environmental and Occupational Health at the University of Washington, and an adjunct professor at the Master of Engineering Management of St. Martin's University. As a senior research ergonomist and epidemiologist, he's performed numerous projects, primarily in real workplaces, to study relationships between workplace factors and musculoskeletal disorders, develop job assessment tools, and evaluate workplace ergonomics interventions. With an engineering background, Stephen promotes solutions that can be integrated in industrial processes and machine product designs to enhance productivity and improve work efficiency. He's done many ergonomics consultations with a wide range of industries. As a seasoned instructor, Stephen has taught many targeted audiences, including ergonomists, health and safety specialists, engineers, production workers, and university students. He serves as an editor for ergonomics and a senior editor for ergonomics in design. And with that, it is my pleasure to hand over the microphone to Dr. Stephen Bao. Stephen.
Great. Good. Thank you, Alan. And thank you. Welcome, everybody. And good afternoon. I believe everybody is in the afternoon already. So as Aaron introduced that I'm from Washington State, so the Northwest here. And today I'm going to talk one of our current project. We haven't finished that. That's about the janitors workload. So let's talk a little bit about the workplace that I'm working for. So I work for a group called SHARP program. The SHARP stands for Safety and Health Assessment and Research for Prevention, although it's within the government agency. So we are very unique. So we are a research group. In Washington State Department of Labor Industries, we have two major functions. One is just like OSHA, there's a state OSHA develop regulations and enforce those regulations. Another one we use a lot, that is the works comp system in Washington State. So 70% of workers get their works comp insurance through our agency. So with that, SHARP is in a very unique position. We have lots of data to analyze. So that's really good. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we use the data. And since we are a research group, we do lots of different types of research. So within SHARP, we have different expertise. We have data folks. They go through the works comp data and looking for trends. We have lots of epidemiologists. We have 4 ergonomists. We have occupational psychologists, occupational medicine doctors. We even have economists. So to analyze the data related to how they impact the economy of companies. We have industrial hygienists, we have safety engineers, we have sociologists, of course we have engineers, and also people dealing with management. So since we have such rich data through our works comp, so every year we look at our works comp data very, very closely to look for trends. So from these slides, you'll be able to see a comparison between all state-funded companies with the janitors job in terms of their injury day and rates. So you can see from 2006 to 2016, the 10 years period. So this is all industries data. They are kind of flat, lower a little, and decrease a little bit. However, with the janitorial service industry, their injury rates is pretty high. So the rate is how many works comp claims per 10,000 full-time employees. And so this is from Washington State's works comp data. So our impression is the janitorial service industry is experiencing very high injury rates. And we also looked at the Bureau of Labor Statistics data for 2017. So as you can see, this is the injury rates for 10,000 full-time employees for all occupation. That's 89.4. However, for the janitorial service is doubled. That means the injury among the janitorial service workers are really high. And this is from our works comp data as well, as you can see here. And this is all claim of compensable claim rates from 4 on the same level. So that's the 2 major injury claims. One is fall, another is musculoskeletal problem to the back. So they have very high rates of fall compared to the general industries or industries, and they have very high musculoskeletal problem with all the industries. So that's again is from our Washington State's works comp data. So because of that, we can generate our problem statement. So the cleaning industry or janitorial industry activities is a major problem. And then we also looked several other studies. We found there is a special characteristics with the janitorial service industry. First of all the cleaning activities happened in organizations, usually is outsourced. So those organizations, they may have very good occupational health policies themselves. However, because the janitors are contractors, they are not covered by those organizations they are serving. So they are quite often, those janitors' occupational health safety issues are overlooked, ignored. And from one publication in 2013 from University of Washington, they also found out, they confirmed this. So even those organizations, they may have well-established occupational health and safety programs, the issues of cleaning workers, work condition are often overlooked. So they confirmed from their study. And then, as you could see from my previous slide, based on Washington State's works comp data, we have very high, the janitors have very high works comp claims. So Caroline Smith and Naomi Anderson, they published that in this publication. And then based on University of California systems data, they also found very similar results. So the high works comp claims occurred among the janitors, janitorial service. So one example here from the University of California system alone, there were 761 workers compensation claims among their cleaning workers in 2010. And with an estimated direct cost of $7.1 million. So that's lots of money spent on that. And another thing is, it has been suggested that the workload among commercial cleaning workers has been increased over the years because lots of companies have reorganized their activities or have been increasing. So they put more people into the same square footage. That means the workload among the janitors is increased. That's what, at least what the janitors from some survey study, the janitors, they self-report that. So we found that information from several publications. And then we often hear that the workload is high among janitors. So we start to look into the industry to see how they actually assign jobs to the workers. We realized actually the cleaning industry is a very well organized industry. First of all, just like in the manufacturing world, like people make cars, they have really, really detailed time study to see how much time is required to complete one particular task. I don't know whether you guys know the MTM type of study. So basically, every movement people can attach some kind of standard time. So most people will be able to complete that particular movement or particular task within that time frames. So within the cleaning industry, and they accumulated those data since the 50th of last century. So the most recent publication is 2018, and Ben Walker, he compiled all the standard time data. So most industries, most cleaning companies, they actually use the time standards. So that made us really wonder why, if they are using the time standard, why the workload is still high, at least reported by the workers. And then we also look at some previous publications. They are not a lot. However, most researchers, they look into the postures, the liftings. So ergonomic researchers, they want to use those kind of ergonomics methods. So by looking at those ergonomic publications, we realized, yeah, there are lots of high-risk janitorial tasks. So we don't really know why there is a difference. If people all follow the standard time, it's supposed to be okay because majority of people will be able to do that job. However, from the ergonomics researchers, they found problems. So the current knowledge on the cleaning workers' workload is still very limited. That's what we determined. And some history back in Washington, in the time in Washington State was in the March 2014, the Washington State Legislature legislation session, two state representatives, they had a bill about improving the janitorial workers' workload. So they asked labor industry to give some recommendations. The reason they have that bill was the Washington State study, which was sponsored by the legislature. So they found the issues, the NOAA's study I presented earlier. So the state said, okay, we need to do something about that. So labor industry started a work group. They also gave some recommendations. Among the recommendation was to determine how much workload or how much task are needed to assign to the workers so their workload is appropriate. And then in 2016-ish, I believe it was, my boss came to me, asked me, hey, Stephen, can you tell us how many square footage will be appropriate for the janitors to clean? That's a very big question. He just came to me, casually asked that question. I looked at him, I said, there's no way I can answer that question. So I did some sketches on a piece of paper. I said, well, there are a few things we need to consider. What kind of a task the workers are doing and where they are doing the task. So it can be very different from one office environment to a conference room cleaning. It can be very different, right? The third parameter will be what kind of tool they are using. So if they use a small vacuum cleaner or a very powerful one, this can be very different too. So the three parameters, one is the task, one is the location, one is the tool. They will be able to determine how many square footage they are allowed to do. So I said, yeah, if you can give me some time and some funding to do a project, I might be able to develop a calculator for you. We can go from there to help the employers. So that was around 2016. And then in the 2017 state legislation session, and they start to discuss a budget for this. That year, there was not enough budget. We did not get that. I think that a year later, because Washington State allowed marijuana sale, so legalized marijuana, and the state got lots of money from there. And somebody raised a hand. Do you want to ask a question? Alan, allow that person? I don't know whether they could not hear or not.
That's okay, Stephen. I'll field any questions on this
Okay.
end.
So I just don't want.
Absolutely, I understand.
So my sound, my people can still hear me, right?
Yes, I believe people can hear you just fine. I haven't received any complaints. Okay.
Okay, good.
Okay.
And so basically we got lots of money, and then in the 2018, we got funding to do the study. So some more data. So in Washington State, the main issue here could be fall, musculoskeletal disorders, and then musculoskeletal disorder is on the back, shoulder, hand, wrist, and knee, elbow. That's among the janitors. And then when we started the project, that's the bill. Finally, we got money 2018. Okay. And then we started the project. So we want to investigate the workload issues, and then more specifically, we want to develop a workload calculator that managers and the EHS folks in the industry can use. And then we decided, because it's lots of money to tell you the truth. So we decided we need to make a full-blown study. So we have statewide survey among janitors to see what kind of problem, where they work, what kind of things. And then we have focus groups. We have injured worker interviews. And we find those injured workers from the works comp claim database. And this is the area where we are going to do lots very detailed study, and then develop that calculator. So we do a lot of workplace measurements, biomechanical exposure quantification through observation and measurements in the field. So that's the area I'm responsible for. That's also the area I'm going to present a little bit more in details. So just I assume everybody knows this. I just want to emphasize ergonomics. So ergonomics, we study two things: the work requirement, how many heavy things people need to lift, how frequent people need to move, what kind of posture people need to adopt during work. Another is the work, they are all typo, okay? Work requirement, the other side should be the person's capacity, They need to be balanced. So how much we can lift, okay? So I'm sorry, this should be workers' capacity. Okay, and then when we talk about a workload, we start to think it's actually a very vague concept. What do we mean by workload? It could be a mental workload. It could be the speed is too fast. It could be, work pace is too high. It could be the posture workload. They have to assume very awkward postures. Or it could be force, repetition, the amount of time they have to assume lift something. So we said, okay, we really need to define that and really need to look into the different aspects of what we think is a workload. And by doing the calculator, we thought, okay, we need to have a more comprehensive conceptual model in order to do the proper measurement. So we developed this conceptual model. So all those external things, the contract, regulation, market situation will determine how many different tasks a janitorial service company promise the organization they provide their service, right? And then within the work site, we have the environment, what kind, whether it's a carpet, the density of workstations, all those, we call that environment. The tasks that's written in the contract, how many different tasks they need supposed to do, vacuuming, wiping, different bathroom cleaning, all those things. And then the janitorial service company's tool, technology. So that's within this. All this create what we call biomechanical exposure. They apply on the worker, depending on type of worker. It could be a female, male. They have different exposures, response. And depending on how long they work on the task, they have the exposure. That is the workload. That is workload, right? And of course, the off-work environment and the different work organization will also influence that. They may have different perceptions. All this will cause whether the work gets injured, the health outcome, their productivity, their cost, all those. Because we got lost money. The legislature also wants us to look into the harassment victim aspects. So that's why we put it there as an outcome measure. So I'm not going to talk about this. That's another element of our study. Okay, so I'll focus on basically this area. That's where we collect the data, develop the calculator. So this area we have the task, what kind of thing they are doing. We have the technology. So how they are going to do the work. We have, where's my cursor? We have the environment where they do that. And then we have work capacity, all those duration things. So the first area is what we are going to measure. And then we put that into percent of time duration. We calculate the task exposure. Okay, so, and then this looks very complicated. That's the steps we used in terms of collect data and analyze the data and then develop our calculators. So basically what we are going to do, we wanted to do is develop a janitor job profile for different tasks. So we did lots of site visits, figure out how many different tasks people are performing. So each of the tasks can have a duration. And then the overall exertion is a combination, all those tasks combined. Within the task, we can have different environment, different location where they did the job. So it could be in the bathroom, it could be in the office, it could be in the kitchen area. So they are all different. And then they use different tools. Backpack vacuum, they could use wired vacuum and heavier vacuum or whatever. Okay, so different things. And then we determine what are the risk factors. Since this is more like ergonomic study, so we have those all typical risk factors: force, posture, repetition, and by different body parts. And we also look at overall exertion using oxygen consumption calculations, basically through heart rate. Since you guys went through other ergonomics trainings, so you know for different ergonomics risk factors, we have different tools to determine the risk level. So we determine all the risk levels by body parts. And then when you consider all those combinations, you should be able to obtain a summary physical exposure. So this is the concept we used for our calculation, calculator development. Okay, all those things. Also, we did another measurement because as I mentioned, the industry had a time standard about different tasks. So we used their standards. For different tasks, we calculate the standard time needed or allowed by the industry using the industrial standard time. So we know the task, we know the location, we know the tool used, so we can obtain the allowed time. And then we calculate the actual time performed the job. We do that. So that's another measure of the workload. And this is just a very brief overview about different risk factors. I just take one as one example. So for the shoulder, we have awkward postures, repetition, we have forceful exertion, we have manual material handling. It could be lifting, could be push-pull, could be carry. So if they use power tools, if you drive machines, you can have hand arm vibrations. So a whole body vibration, all this will be considered. So we consider all the different body parts, all the different risk factors. And then, of course, we have corresponding tools for all those risk factor evaluations. Method will be perform site visits. So we make our project manageable. We chose largest office buildings, commercial office buildings. And about 70% of janitors work in that type of environment. So invited some janitors as volunteers. So we shadow their work. So basically perform on-site job observation. And we collected direct measurements, which include heart rates, trunk postures, how many steps they work, and all those. We did video recording, so we can analyze them back in our lab, so we could have very detailed time study on hand movements, detailed study on different shoulder movements, and how many exertions they have for the different task, location, and tool combinations. And this is one of the direct measurements. And so basically put monitors there to measure the heart rate, okay? And then we have different tools. So we write down, during observation, we write down these are the tools they use. So we went back to do the measurements, how heavy they are, and all those. And this will be used as one of the parameters we use for the tool. And video recording. So all detailed task analysis for, so far we get all the different tasks. Within tasks, we have lots of different subtasks. So the analysis is very, very detailed. And as you can see, we break it down after time study, we can break down all the combinations based on the task, the location, and the tool. And then we have the allowed industry standard time and the actual measurement time. So we use the MVTA, that's a video analysis, to do the time study. And in terms of risk assessment, we use the revised strain index and recommended RCRA, recommended cumulative recovery allowance, which can be used on the shoulder, low back, and other body parts. And we used the Australian method, manual task risk assessment, or MANTRA. And we used additional method if those exposures occur. We use Nash lifting equation. If they have to lift heavy stuff, we used the Michigan's 3D SSPP, the biomechanical modeling calculation. And for the neck, we used Suzanne Rogers' muscle fatigue model. And if they do lots hand pinching force or hand exertion, we use Jim Podwin's method, hand pack. If they do push, pull, or lift carry, we use Liberty Mutual's manual material handling tables. And if they do vibration, so far we haven't seen any, but in the method design, we said we are going to use the European Union's vibration standards if whole body vibration occurred or if hand-arm vibration risk occurred. Okay, so these are the methods we used for the risk assessment. So these are all the actual data collection. And then so far, before the COVID lockdown last March, we collected data from 13 subjects. They were doing, actually we spent 17 site visits, usually it's evening shifts. And altogether we have 118 task location tool combinations. So we were able to calculate the differences between actual time compared to the standard, industry standard time. As you can see, for most of the time, this is just example, for most of the time, they actually work faster than the industrial suggested time. Okay, so we haven't really got all the summary data yet, and this is one example the data look like. And the posture, so as you can see, different tasks, they have different postures. This is one example, trunk flexion greater than 60 degrees % time. So you can see the restroom cleaning involve much higher back bending. So this is a heart rate. This is a heart rate for different tasks. So we can see that there are differences. So we are going to put all those exposure measurements there to build them into the calculator. So far we finished all data processing. We just need to clean up the data and put them together. And then my expected completion time for the generator and the calculator development is by the end of this year. And if possible, I would really like to go back to the field to do some validation, evaluation of the calculator, and may adjust a little bit. So that is the general idea, okay? And it looks like the different tools they used may influence the work pace. So we think, okay, that's really good. The user of our calculator will be able to use some sort of pull down menu to select, okay, I would like to assign this particular worker, this task, this task, this task, for example, 3 tasks during the work. So they know where they are going to assign to. There's a location parameter. They know what kind of tool they are going to use. So a manager may say, okay, I want this worker to do this task for 2 hours, 4 hours for the other task, another 2 hours for the third task. Then the generator will generate a report. Here is the workload profile look like. The main limiting factor could be, for example, the backbending. Inside the calculator, we do lots detailed analysis, but the user don't have to know. They just say, no, okay, the low back is problematic. And then in the calculator, we also give suggestions. So because of, for example, because of low back is problematic, what you need to do is reduce the amount of work, for example, for the bathroom cleaning. Or if we, from our site visits, if we know certain particular tools may help improve the backloading, we may also give suggestions. Here is possibility you might be able to consider by using this type of tool. So this will be the structure of the calculator. And so, yeah, this is the current status, how many things, how much we finished. And there is a difficulty to perform this type of work, study. It's pretty difficult to get somebody into the study. First of all, the janitors, they are connected to multiple stakeholders. First of all, is janitorial company. They need to agree to participate in the study. And then it will be their service organizations. They need to agree, although our study will not really benefit them. Some of them will say, oh, no, I don't want you guys to be in my building. Even the janitorial firm said, I want you to do the study among our janitors, right? So that's a problem we had. The third one is the individual janitors. So sometimes they don't really trust their employers. So they say, why the employers want us to be involved in this study? So you need to get their approval as well, because it's a research. IRB requires you have to get all the consensus from the participants. So we had lots difficult time to recruit people. But before the COVID, we have 3 more sites lined up. Unfortunately, they all doing very different things right now, so we cannot go back. So hopefully the COVID will be gone and then we can go back. Another thing is the language and the culture barriers. Most janitorial workers are from another country or from different cultures. So they are not used this type of research. Quite often they will say, why you need to do a research on our job? What's the benefit you guys are going to get? Because we also pay them some cash for their participation. So sometimes they are very suspicious what we are trying to do with them. So we have to convince them. Yeah, so the language and culture barrier is another thing. And of course, then we have the pandemic. And our original design was to have more subjects, less detailed study, detailed data analysis. However, due to the COVID, we said, okay, we have only 13 subjects, but we do very detailed analysis. As you could see, we have a very detailed analysis tools. So yeah, managers, the calculator will be used by managers for planning their job, can also be used by the EHS staff to estimate their existing job risk. Okay, we have a website, so you guys can see our progress. That's www.lni.wa.gov and then /shop/janitors. So where we periodically publish some of our reports. And so far we finished our focus group data analysis. And then we also have collected all the survey data, which is in the process of being analyzed. So you can follow us there, get more information. So this is just tell you how many different languages we dealt with. So last time it's very difficult even to find the interpreters for that. So with that, I think my time is over. And the next 14, 15 minutes will be question time.
Okay, thank you very much. That was excellent. We do have some questions. And I think I'd like to ask one to kick it off. Do you think the calculator, when it's completed, may be adaptable to other industries?
Yes or no. I think the approach, before I start to design this study, I look at other occupations. To be honest, there are not many this type of workload calculators available. The only available ones are among nursing staff. So that industry, the nursing industry, have been doing lots of things. Actually, they have been doing that for 20, 30 years, and people are still discussing that. So what we think is our data will be applicable for the commercial building, office building janitors, because that's the job we looked at. However, the structure will be applicable to other industries. So basically, you just need to collect more data to fill in and then get something, because ours will list, this is a task, this is a location, this is a tool to get your workload. You can use the same structure, just need to collect more data to get a task, location, and tool, and then to expand the calculator. So that's why I said yes or no. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Can you talk about the survey portion, the questions and the style of implementing the questionnaire, and also I'll couple it with another question. And did you provide the questionnaire in other languages other than English? I know you touched on the different languages, native speakers that you dealt with, but wondering, did you also present the questionnaires in other native languages?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the questionnaire is basically, it's very complicated. I did not have time to present. So it covers the general occupational health aspects, and their general health, and their how many different tasks and work jobs they do, because they are usually low income workers, so they cannot really just work on one job. And also some ergonomics factors, and because we have a sexual harassment component, we ask a few questions on that. The questionnaire is administered by a survey company rather than by us. So we developed the questionnaire, and then it's administered by the survey company. And they survey all the, we collect a database from the union and from the industrial association. So we got as many as possible, the number of janitors contact information. And the questionnaire is in multiple languages. So there is a language line we use. And the survey company has some languages, however, they don't have all. So we also use a service line for that, but it's all contracted through that survey company. Yeah, hopefully that's answer your question.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to endeavor to present this question to you in to the best of my understanding here. Did you notice a difference between the sort of organized prescription of tasks and the components of the work and the real work that the worker performed? And if you did, how did you integrate these differences into your approach? I
Okay.
believe I've captured the questioner's question.
Right. So basically, if I understand correctly, so we have the industrial standards. So doing this task at this location using this type of tool, how much time based on industrial standard is allowed to perform the task? Yeah, of course, with the square footage. And then we observe the actual time they spend. Usually they work faster. So usually the company allocate more tasks, assign more tasks to the worker. Although when we talk to the management, they say, oh, we use the software to determine how much amount of work. But in reality, they probably allocate more tasks to them. So what we are going to do is in our calculator, we are going to list, this is the time based on the task, location, and tool you use. This is how much time you need to consider based on the industrial standard. So that's what we are going to build that in.
I see. So it's really time focused. The questioner had a follow up and as sort of your ability to integrate the seriousness of a risk beyond just the time, but perhaps other factors that didn't match the prescription.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, the workload definition is very complicated, although it's just one word, workload. It could be lifting, it could be work pace, it could be posture. So that's why we use so many different risk assessment tools in our data collection. So within the calculator in the background, it actually will look for all the risk factors, including the work pace, but also have lifting, have posture, have repetition. All those will be included, and also include different body parts. And then we'll, so say, if the manager say, you do this task for 2 hours, in the background, you will say whether it's the work pace issue or whether it's the shoulder issue. And then we'll point out, this is the problem. You have too much, allocate too much work because the shoulder loading is too high. Or it could be simply just work pace. You assign too much job. They cannot finish within the time you assign to them. Yes, it will be considered. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Let's see now. I think early in the talk, you spoke about, or you presented a chart, workers' comp chart, and I think one of the #1 causes or reported rather injuries was a fall from same level.
Right.
Have you seen that risk? Were you able to identify that risk in your field work so far, and potential solutions to mitigate that risk?
Yes, it's kind of not the focus of this project, but we could really understand that because in the work sites, that's a work site, not the janitorial company's work site, as some other people's work site. So people may misplace certain things on the road, so they can step into that, or the stair not properly repaired. But for most of those, the 13 companies we were at, not 13 subjects within 3 different organizations we went to, themselves have very good practice. For example, if a road in the surface, work surface is slippery, they always put a cone there to avoid stepping on that. So those are the conventional safety issues, people need to practice, but that's not the expertise of us, the ergonomists. So we did not address that.
Okay, thank you. Can you provide some thoughts on the usefulness of heart rate data in the janitor work assessment and your planned analysis approach strategies for going forward?
Yeah. So we know the overall workload based on the oxygen consumption or based on the heart rate is one measure. So we will use the heart rate data to evaluate that. Basically, that's the same as posture data or the others as one of the factor. So it could be limiting factor. The person works really, really hard and work pace is really high and they lift very heavy things. Their heart rate is way higher. So we could identify that simply by the heart rate. So we are going to build that into the calculator. Basically, that's parallel to other risk factors. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Why do you suspect the work was performed faster than the industry standards, and how might this impact fatigue on the site?
It's not we suspect, it's what we analyzed based on our data.
So, I think the question was really why do you, sorry, I think they were asking for potential, your thoughts on why this occurs, perhaps.
Oh, okay, yeah. Why this occurs? That's very simple because the company, the market is very, very competitive right now. And so all the janitorial firms, they want to get the contract. So quite often they put a very low bid to get the contract. And then in order to finish the work, they have to let the workers work faster.
I see. That sort of follows on here to this another question that you mentioned: parameters, task environment, and tool, physical ability of a person. How about job organization? It can be problematic if the person can't have control of the workload put upon them.
Yeah, so that's our economists also look at those issues. So we work with the janitorial, the building management organization as well. So there are trends. There are certain trends in the industry because the competition. So we don't really know how we can influence that, but we are going to provide all the information to them, at least through the education. So hopefully we can make the field more fair for the different competitors. And we also work with Ben Walker, the guy who is responsible for all those industrial standard work time. He is very interested in our study. So maybe because they have the industrial conventions, conferences every year. So he's going to probably bring our results to them to let the industry know what's the current status, how they are going to manage that for the future, more healthy industry.
Yeah. Okay, we're getting close to the end of time. I don't want to trespass on people's spare time here, but one more, I think. Did you have an opportunity to observe any ergonomic tools in the field, like grabbers or extenders, to help workers reduce bending forward, or any other example of these kind of tools in your work?
Exactly. Yeah. So that's the thing when we talk about task, location, and tools. In the tools they use, we make notes if we see something which is more ergonomically designed. Actually, certain locations, they have very good ergonomics program. They ask the janitors to give ideas how they can improve their work. For example, when they bring trashes, heavy trashes to the dumpster, lots of places, the worker has to use one hand hold the dumpster lid, another hand lift. So just one hand lift the trash bags, throw that in. So one company we visited, they basically just developed a holder, it's a pole. So they can just use that pole, hold the dumpster lid, and then they can use both hands to lift. So all those will include in our tool variable. So when the user look at that variable, there will be multiple selections in terms of variation. So for example, my cleaner need to dump the dumpster. So we are going to ask, do they have special tools? Do they use that typical bar to hold the lid? If they don't, then they have a higher risk. If they do, they have a lower risk. Then that will basically provide the user an idea, oh, they can actually doing the same task, they can actually lower the load by providing that piece of equipment.
Okay, that's excellent, excellent answer. And we are indeed out of time. I apologize if I didn't get to your question. As a reminder, everyone who logged in today with their registration email will receive a link to the evaluation form, and it'll qualify you for a certificate of completion worth 1 CE contact hour. I want to thank Dr. Stephen Bao again very much for an excellent presentation, and we hope very much that you'll join us for our next webinar. So thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Bao, and we'll see you later.
Great.